right, this is an opportunity for my bad artistic work to come to full light, so I admit freely that I can't draw. But what we're going to do, and we're going to look at some of these diagrams here on the back, on the board here, is understanding the relationships of the person and being of God. Okay, we've talked about this briefly. Let's just reinforce it because, again, it's a hard concept. When we look at the definition, again, we've said within one being that is God, there exist eternally three co-equal and co-eternal persons, namely the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, that definition has to be put in context of being and person. God is one unique, undividable, indivisible, divine being. And also, God is one being that exists in those co-eternal divine persons. And those divine persons have their role and function in the economy of that Trinity. Hank Hanegraaff referenced this, and maybe this will help you. It says, when speaking of the Trinity, we need to realize that we're talking about one what, God, three beings, who. One what is the being or essence of God, and three whos are the Father, Son, and Spirit. We dare not mix up the whats and the whos regarding the Trinity. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to point to a couple of different whats and whos mix up, and then one complete failing attempt to try to draw the Trinity, but maybe it'll help you. Maybe you can see how this works out. This upper diagram, we basically have a circle with a good old peace symbol sitting in the middle of it that represents the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. God is 1/3 Father, 1/3 Son, 1/3 Spirit. That's not correct because there are three persons, but they're all God. So as much as that sounds good, it isn't, because that would sort of, God is additive, and that's not what God is. God is not additive. We also have to realize that the distinctions don't add to the person of God. It's not like the Father overlaps here, the Son overlaps here, and the Holy Spirit overlaps here, and the intersection, if you will, of the three persons create the being of God. Because that's saying like, well, there's something about the Son that's different, and the Father that's different, and the Holy Spirit's that's different. Now, in roles, yes, the Spirit doesn't do what the Father does, the Father doesn't do what the Spirit does, the Son doesn't do what the Father does functionally, but the being of God is not additive or put together. So you don't have thirds in this diagram, you don't have addition in this diagram. And one of the other errors that we've talked about is modalism. So here is, well, Father, Son, and Spirit, there's God, but He, depending on the situation, reacts and becomes the Father here, and then becomes the Spirit there, and then becomes the Son in another situation. So that's that modalism, or the dynamic monarchianism, or the rules and everything's changing. So it's not like God is just changing who He appears to be. So that's not correct. So not a third, a third, and a third, not additive, and not changing mode. So those are three ways that you can misrepresent it. Now, this fourth diagram is, again, a failed attempt, but it's as good as we're probably going to be able to draw for drawing. Is, think about this as, here's the being of all of who God is. And then there's the function, the person of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. But these little dotted lines between it saying, but they're all God. They're not divided up, they're not additive, but they do have different roles and purpose and function. But they're three individual people, but all God. So everything flows in here. So if you rotated things around, the being and essence of who God is all part of the Trinity. This is all He is. The Father is all God, the Son is all God, the Spirit is all God. Three persons, one being, same essence, different roles. Now again, that's a miserable attempt to try to do that, but that's probably as good as we're going to get. So again, being, the essence of who God is, all the same. The persons, all distinct as persons, personality, who they are, and each of them have a different role, the economy of the Trinity. So now that we've kind of beaten a undefinable and very difficult topic from that perspective, let's take a few minutes, and next we're going to sort of reflect on the beauty of the Trinity in creation and the beauty of the Trinity in salvation. We've talked about it, but let's look at just some of how beautiful that is. Just sometimes we get tied up in theology and we forget there's a beauty to all of how God interacts, who God is, and how He works. So that'll be our next and final section that we'll conclude on.